So the Fab Four, let's crack on, shall we? A warm welcome to Scott to the group. So a great addition. And I think like last time, we're trying to centralize our focus on off payroll compliance, workforce in general, and trying to help provide advice to people that they can take forward. And last time we had a really good chat about a lot of the pain and the challenges. We wanted to flip it up a little bit this time and start to talk about, well, what does that mean? How can we help people identify the problems and identify the change and really help them influence the business? Here we go. Who wants to say something first?
Take you out the limelight straight off. I'm happy to just sort of throw a comment out there to begin with. And I think the first thing that we kind of all probably do recognize is, we have to sort of sympathize and empathize with the people that have this, that land on their desk, because ultimately this sits with many different departments, but you'll end up with one stakeholder that is the stakeholder that needs to run with this, and they need to make something happen. Now, sometimes that doesn't even happen with C-suite approval. It doesn't happen with their support. It's just, we should be doing something. Here it is. And, as professionals, we want to help support those people, but also be on their side to help them face the challenges that they're working with internally, and really help drive the narrative of why this is important, but how it can help all those other stakeholders that have, fortunately for them, not had this land on their desk. I think that's a really positive thing to start with, because a lot of people feel, I've got this thing, it's not important, it's not seen by the business, but you can kind of really drive something really impactful with the right collaboration and the right support and the right understanding of why this is important for so many parts within the business.
I used to start with customers, right? When something like that dropped onto someone's plate, like an example would be finance would go, oh, this cost is getting out of control. And it would all of a sudden be their plate. So they stuck their head above the parapet, right? And now it's your problem. We would always start by talking to them about, okay, this is surfaced for you, this symptom's surfaced for you, but actually the cause is going to affect everyone. So how do you bring in that like cross-functional group of team members into this conversation, and understanding that, okay, cost might be the symptom, but that must also mean that there's a resourcing problem, a skills problem somewhere in the business. There's probably an onboarding and a workforce control element somewhere in the business. Being able to explain that to a finance director, I think it can add a bit of comfort, because it means you're not alone. And whilst the symptom might sit on your desk and set off your little alarm bell, it's almost always the case that it's touching every element of the business.
And just to add on to that, education is quite key, but the reason the business do certain things isn't because of they're trying to do the wrong thing on purpose. It's because the education's not there. They don't realize what the impact could be to the business, and a lot of the time they're just tasked to get stuff done. The work has to get done. They've got a KPI or SLA. Their bonuses may be attributed to it. So sometimes when you're at that role of trying to support or enable the business, there's all these other components and stresses that are going on to the actual area that needs something done. And like we've talked before, how do you empower that area to make it simpler, to support them in the best way, to educate as well, but not ram it down their throat, because they'll see you as a barrier. So it is about empowerment. It is about getting the right messaging and making it simpler.
It's a really good point. I always sort of feel a bit mad for people. It very rarely is it in someone's set of KPIs or OKRs to enact transformational change this quarter. Like you wouldn't sign up to that as a job spec, right?
Say, for example, I came from procurement, and no one wanted to own the contingent workforce area within the organization, and procurement took it on. It became more than procurement. It became more than category management. In a way, I was influencing the strategy for the organization for external workforce. So trying to communicate that up and having the right information to take up to convince everybody to change it's the biggest challenge, because you're, unfortunately, sometimes in the organization you may be seen at a certain level, and then you're trying to manage upwards some of the education, then you're trying to manage downwards and sideways. So it is extremely hard job.
We didn't really want to talk too much about the problems and challenges, because we've sort of been through that a little bit last time. But the big question that a lot of businesses that I speak to is, well, how do we even get together what those problems are? Like, how do I strategize and find out and research across my business what, where are the problems, what are the challenges? Because a lot of businesses that I speak to, they might hear some noise about sourcing challenges, or they've got a managed service provider that's working a certain way. We're not utilizing this type of resource in the right way, and it's just like it's almost like how on earth do you help a client who hasn't got experience of managing a contingent program actually just sort of stop and think, what should I even look at first? I think it'd be interesting, because especially from you, Scott, you've got more client side experience than we have, right? And have you been through experiences like that yourself, where you've had to work with business leaders, think, oh my God, how am I even going to get out what the challenges are?
Back in the day when I was a customer, I started with the data and the lack of data. That actually helped bringing the honesty up. Hey, we don't have any visibility of this. Hey, I can start seeing all these suppliers they should be workforce providers, but they're classified in different areas, highlighting the gaps. Sort of spell out the story. If there is no visibility, if there are gaps, if there's potential risk to your organization, sometimes you have to share the warts to be able to get action to happen.
Yeah,
there's no point going to the doctor and lying, right? Yeah, because you're there for a reason. But I'm with you. I think it all starts with visibility, because you can't start classifying and fixing problems, and then 6 months later down the line you find a new cohort of consultants that's been in there for 6 months or something. It unravels really quickly if you don't have that holistic picture of everything that's going on in the organization. So start with the really nitty gritty line by line stuff. Unfortunately, it's taking everything out of the HRIS and then reconciling it with the costs. Like, you'll find a singular version of the truth, and then from there you can start to make informed decisions. But if they're not building that sort of foundation in data, then you're just going to uncover more problems later.
I think sometimes as well that it's people get a bit of that imposter syndrome of being able to deal cross-functionally and work with other teams. And I think this is part of the reason we're producing this, is that it helps you to zoom out and see the bigger picture. And even if it gives you a little bit of credibility going into the HR department or into the procurement team or into the compliance team with a couple of ideas of where you think, hey, is this a barrier? Is this a challenge? You're almost going in better prepared to ask those questions, so that maybe there's that little bit lighter bit of engagement. We know what it's like. You go to a team, everybody's super busy, and I'm too busy to deal with, I haven't got a clue. Whereas opposed to if you've just got a little bit of a snippet of, hey, is this one of your challenges? Or could it be one of these 3 challenges? 7, 8, 9 times out of 10, it's probably going to be one of those. And it just builds that bit of credibility for yourself to open that door to have an open and honest conversation. But I think what Scott and Jack have said there, like the vulnerability and just saying that we just don't know. We'd love to understand it more. How do we understand it more? And I think with everything that's coming up, it's empowering people with these tools to be able to confidently say, we don't know, but we're really interested to find out. Can you help us support and guide us in the right way? And I think this type of, because it affects so many functions within a business, you do need that top-down view, and you need the ability to empower the person you're dealing with that's taking this as your kind of key stakeholder that's going to drive the message through of, yeah, we can help you with that, and here's some really good questions to ask, and here's a really good direction to go, here's the problems that they face. Because Otherwise, you're just not going to know what their challenges are because we're also siloed in our own role.
I had a really good discussion 2 weeks ago where, just as part of any business, right, we're doing outreach and trying to help and understand whether our solutions can support clients. I had a really interesting discussion where I was just asking questions. So this person didn't know who I was, didn't know where I come from. I didn't know what really their problems was, and I went in with just the simple question of asking, what's your preferred method of engaging workers? And the answer back was, well, we just use third-party agencies. And I said, okay, let's just roll back. So when you mean third-party agencies, talk to me, educate me on what your understanding of third-party agencies is. Is that PAYE? Are you bringing in limited? And I quickly found out that actually the best route to try and help that person was actually trying to educate them on the different types of engagement models that are available. So I could really understand what their knowledge and picture is, because I think half of the battle I find within the industry is that there are people that just traditionally go one route and have always been down that route, but don't understand what other models are out there. So they may be bringing in all these people under a third-party supply, but because they lack knowledge of understanding the differences between a PSC, limited company versus someone who's under an umbrella, PAYE paid, it sort of stops, and that sort of almost restricts their I suppose avenues for finding the right solutions. And I know we talked about it before, but the education piece of making sure people actually know what routes to engage, even if they don't engage that way, I found probably most impactful in that discussion and in previous discussions, because then it starts to open their eyes out and think, well, hold on a minute, there are other routes here that I can choose, and I don't know if any of you guys have experienced that it's just that initial lack of knowledge of what's available restricts people's ability to just become more strategic.
That knowledge piece, Alex, also take it up to a different level. Say within an organization, if you went and asked the CEO, do you know the makeup of your workforce? And this, sometimes that knowledge, that information isn't actually going up to that level. They may not be aware that could be over 50% is external, that these are the guys representing their organization and making their products or doing the innovation, but they don't know because nobody's communicating that up to them. But then, to your point, the education, but what does this mean to my organization for risk? Where does the IP sit? Are we liable for certain things? So it's interesting. And I was talking to also someone the other day around an ERP rollout. So much focus and implementation on that, so much transformation. But when it comes to workforce, it's always, I hope this is the right way to put it, but quite cheaply. There's not much investment in transformation. We either give it to a partner and we really push down the cost, so it's their margins are minimal. Some of those partners, though, are offering it cheap because that's how they're trying to win the work. Others just don't feel like there should be that much of a focus. But you think about HR and workers and workers as assets, should be probably just as big a focus as the finance side. Because if you didn't have the workers and work getting done, you wouldn't be making money.
However many times I try to look at it, I do, I try to think it can't just be education. It can't just be how a business is, looking at, that route of what they've currently got at the moment, what their risk, how are they facilitating that route, and what are they missing out on? But sometimes it is just as simple as that, and we can have a tendency to overthink it, and it's what I find difficult for clients is there are so many solutions and providers and different options out there that everyone is trying to push their solutions on clients, and everyone's faulty of this in a way sometimes, but trying to push solutions on a client, saying this is the path you need to go, without actually just stopping and thinking and finding out, to your point, Scott, well, hold on a minute here, what actually is what is our makeup of external resource?
So I've got two quite distinct buckets of like client categories in that sense. I think the people that want to solve a very specific challenge tend to be less interested in the education piece. They just want, how can I sort of remove the friction from whatever this challenge is to continue really the status quo? And that's quite common. I go to a lot of events and I hear a lot of businesses talk in those terms. And then the other bucket is how do I take a sort of strategic step here? I want to step back, evaluate the workforce, and education plays such a key part in that piece. Going, oh, there is different options. You can move away from how we've all been doing it for 30 years, actually. And all these challenges that are in the way will be quite easy to hurdle over if we do change that approach. Those types of stakeholders that are much more engaged in education and strategy tend to be much more open-minded in terms of change and progress.
Yeah, Jack, and you're right. They grow in those roles though too. They actually go from being maybe sitting at a layer of just operations, and then become a strategic type of into a more strategic role within their organization, and actually do have a seat at the table. For me, because I've been through that journey, I have an appetite to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. There's either people that will just accept status quo, or people, if you pick this up, it can be a strategic category within an organization. In the past, when I started out, this is the honest truth, I had managers say to me, don't focus on this area. Small purchase orders, so procurement mind, guys. Small purchase orders, fragmented, extremely hard to manage, and you're never going to be able to put a model in across this to manage it. But I did it. I was able to consolidate all that information together back to the data to show actually this is one of the biggest spend categories within our organization, and we need to do something about it. We're managing external people, and back to the point of all the benefits and value that they're bringing to the organization, it needs to be discussed at that higher level within an organization. It needs to be part of the strategic workforce planning.
I think it's also, you look at the ground upwards, everything, when you look at how we work, whether it's full-time employment, whether it's contracted, freelance, contingent, whatever you want to define it, it's changed and it's evolved. And too many businesses just rely on the fact that this is how we've always done it, this is how we should continue to do it. Now, kind of feeding into Jack's point, there's so many businesses out there that are now selling different versions of things that could plug a gap. But it's, again, that sensible strategic conversation of, if I plug this gap with this, where does it break elsewhere? And really just having that open mind and sort of high level vision of, if I just take a bit of accountability and start to think cross-functionally, one, that's going to look great for me as an individual because I'm doing more for the business. Two, I'm getting more exposure to more of the business and generating a better understanding of how business works. And three, you can come out the hero in all this because cross-functionally, you've saved in 4 different categories. No one else has picked up that responsibility. But it's that being openness to, I see that there's a problem here. It can't just be me that's suffering.
Sometimes, though, the buyers may not even realize there's a problem. The requester may not realize there's a problem because they've been doing it the same way since day one, since they started. And it's all about just making sure things happen because they need a delivery. Procurement hat on again, all the massive savings, but then efficiencies in production, getting work done faster, people not spending all their time going out and interviewing people, trying to find the right one because you've got a partner that's actually brought in the right people. Remember the PO and invoice problems. One program that I was involved in had a 92% purchase order failure rate. And that meant 92% of the time somebody had to go in and touch it. And once we put in a program, we removed it. It was down to like 8%. So there's all these efficiencies that could be put in to make it easier Plus, you can get better return on investment, savings, all the other lovely stuff that comes with it, depending on which hat you've got on. It could be a better experience, user experience. It could be a good experience for the worker, and they want to come back and work for you and support your product and all that other beautiful stuff around marketing. There's so much that can come out of these programs if they're done properly.
Go back to the start. We're looking to, how are we trying to help businesses understand if they have a problem? And I actually think, when you listen to all of us, I actually like Jack's opinion and approach there, which is actually, before looking at that and looking at the data, actually just tell me, are you being reactive in solving problems on a day-to-day firefighting basis, or are you being strategic? Are you a bit of both, right? That will give you a good picture of maybe where they're sat and who they're sat. And I don't want to go into the complexities of who owns a program and stuff, because that alone is just a separate discussion, right? So we've identified their approach, right? Then we've got a lot of discussion there just now around, well, then it's the data, right? It's what data do you have? What information do you have? How much do you know about your external workforce, regardless of the method? And then it's about driving in, okay, which methods do you engage in? Which approaches do you engage in? And then you start to layer in some of the education piece to try and, know that. And I think, that's hard for any business to do who doesn't know the industry, right? That's super hard. Like, how many clients have you spoken to? And there obviously are many clients out there that do, but how many clients have you spoken to in the last 6 months that can give you a clear picture on all those points within a call? Like, I would say none from my perspective.
That's the start, isn't it? I think I've been called into a number of rooms and meetings over the years where the big symptom is, we thought we had this many headcount, we've just found out it's 3 times that much. Or we thought we were spending this, we've just found out it's X number of millions of pounds out. Those tend to be the wake up calls, because I think we've all mentioned it. People just get into a rhythm, no matter how painful that rhythm is, if it's the status quo and how you've always done it, until an alarm goes off, people just keep on marching.
You're not alone in this space. There's many that have started the journey and they found these things, and sort of similar size to you. And these are some of the things that they found. Do you find that helps with some of that conversation?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's potentially embarrassing, right, for an organization to not understand that stuff. But I would say to anyone watching this, that's sort of, if it's keeping them up at night, this is almost ubiquitous across every industry and organization over a certain number of people. The unknown unknowns, to use was it Donald Rumsfeld quote, is the thing that businesses just don't have a grip of. Like, they might know that there's a slight problem, but honestly, people are surprised at what comes out of the woodwork as soon as they start looking at it in any sort of detail. But I think the psychology of it is useful to understand that this happens to every organization. Even the best sort of run organizations have to work very, very hard at this to keep it on the rails.
I've had conversations where I've stopped and gone, well, hold on a minute, just forget about your contingent workforce. What objectives are your business working towards right now? Right? What is it you're trying to achieve? Are you trying to achieve, and this links in with Scott's procurement head, are you trying to drive cost savings? You've got so much business coming in within your organization that you need to change how you're scaling and bringing in stuff? Like, what is it that you're using external workforce for? What objectives are you trying to drive? And I'm sometimes there's that missing link between the executive and the actual people delivering, and maybe there's not that middle contingent team in the middle delivering. So I suppose, Scott, if I'm giving trying to give an overarch of several experiences into one, I think that for me has always been the biggest challenge I've seen, which is just stop and think about what your business objectives are first before you try and start implementing. So even that's probably even a layer before your existing contingent workforce plan. Now, it does add some complexities to it, because maybe the business haven't even thought about that. They're literally just taking that approach of like, right, we're implementing a new product, or we're releasing a new pharmaceutical product within our business. In fact, the one I remember was implementing a new different way of energy renewals within their business, and they would just got on straight away and just went down their normal path of hiring. but not thinking about their strategic objectives. And what ended up happening when we went through the analysis is actually the method that they were hiring under was not the most cost-effective way and couldn't actually bring the value that they wanted. And we shifted a number of their workers into, or well, we didn't. We recommended that they shifted some of their workers and started to investigate more of a management consultancy / outsourced SOW route, because actually it made more sense to go that way rather than doing a traditional, go to your supply chain and just put bums on seat. And I think that's probably, when I look at my 20 years and plus, that always seems to be, a missing link in my eyes.
I love that sentiment. I think it's spot on. What are you trying to get out of this? Why are you using these types of people? Like, what are the goals and objectives here? Rather than being completely focused on improving, making efficiencies, reducing costs. Like, let's really get to the kernel of this. Like, what's the objective? It's such a valuable strategic point. But you're right. You very quickly find yourself in talking about aspirations around productivity and innovation and hopes and dreams of the organization. So ring fencing, it's quite complex.
Yeah. To that point, like, the CEO will be interested in looking good out there, and wanting more customers and pleasing their stakeholders, shareholders, whatever. CFO, it's around cost control. So there's CHRO around keeping everybody happy and making sure that the business is supported with the right teams and setups and stuff. So that there is different direct messaging that you can put against the different audiences, and you do have to do that. You have to change the conversation with whichever way you're looking within the organization to get the buy-in. Security, hey, let's help to figure out who's on site doing what for how long, who's IT and security, assets, what assets it's touching. So it's that business case, and you become like a salesperson, an internal salesperson, banging the drum. This is our program, and this is why it's really going to help you with these things. Person X, person Y. With the business, it could be, let's take some operational burden away from you. What is the company and what do they want? But then different heads within that organization will want different things.
I think you'll find that generally messages get misconstrued as they sort of start filtering down. So, has the head of HR had that direct conversation with the CEO where you're trying to go? Probably not. It's just cascaded down via a series of messages and interpretations. And sometimes what it's about is just empowering somebody that, it's not a silly question to ask, well, what's our overall strategy? How do you want it? And kind of pushing back on the CEO, because their mind's thinking in a very different way to what yours is from your job role in a day-to-day. And that collaboration piece then starts to support building that individual, one as your internal stakeholder, but also to build this program of how it affects the whole business. I think we've all probably been in situations where, you're afraid to ask a question because you think it's a silly question. Well, the reality is it's not a silly question. It's just one that probably hasn't been properly answered or properly defined, and that's okay. And as we've already alluded, all businesses are in the exact same position right now. People pulling in different directions, left, right, and center. It might well be that you come back to the business with a couple of solutions, and it's, well, if we're looking at this direction, it's this. If we're looking at this direction, it's that. And I think that's the power of the top-down focus. Yeah. How can we introduce something that supports the business rather than just the function that we're looking at, which goes again to the strategic viewpoint rather than let's just plug a hole.
Dan, on that, as soon as I get any type of support, I use it. Even if say for example, the HRD might have forgotten, he gave me that support. Well, I don't have it written in blood, but that person said that they support me with something, and I use that as much as I can to communicate that message down. When I have to go into the next country, when I have to go into the next program, I'm like, this is what we've aligned on at the top, and we take it down. So instead of that person sending the message, I'm actually saying that person, I'm the person delivering the message from that person.
having that messaging is invaluable, isn't it? If you need to actually run change management. I remember one of the best things a client ever did for me, a big network of advertising agencies. As soon as the contract was signed, they said, I need some sort of mandate. This stuff gets ignored, it gets pushed to the side. And he just wrote this barnstorming email that was, this is what we do. This is the new process. This is how we do business. If you don't like it, come and see me. And I pinned it to every office door that I walked in and out of, because it's dynamite. It got people's attention. It was clear, it was fair. And it meant that when I asked for meetings and when I needed to bring people on that journey, I could say, it's not really a decision that I'm asking you to make.
Yeah. Jack, how comfortable did you feel doing that initially at the time? Pretty quickly.
What's the alternative, right? I think change management like this the difference was between something taking 6 months to roll out and something taking 1 month to roll out. So comfortable or not. Exactly. Also, if you want to roll this stuff out, it's about the people that you're touching and interacting with. So you have to bring them on that journey with you. So it's not about using it as a stick. It's about saying, right, this is the context. Okay, I have the mandate. I'm not here to sell this to you. The sale's done. How can we work together to create the impact that we want to create? And then you're right, every time you can make an ally, you do make an ally. And then word will start to spread that actually it's not that painful and this guy's not dreadful to work with and the results are actually quite good. And as soon as that sea change, that swell starts to develop, it gets way easier. And it's you're sort of pushing on an open door towards the end of a program like that.
And you have to put your head above the parapet sometimes to actually, to make things happen, because unfortunately, it sounds like we've all seen this. If you don't lead it, if you don't take that leadership role, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and you have to believe it. You have to believe in the results and the output. I think people will always be able to tell if this is just another change management program, and it will go away in a couple of months if I ignore it. So you have to be really passionate about it. I think when you do get face time, you've really got to be able to explain what the brilliant benefits are and why the ROI for them as a department, an individual and a business are worth it.
Yeah, I'd agree. And it's, about being able to create that return on investment of doing these things is always tricky. But I think if you can link, the overall business objective, and let's just say, business objective is, geez, we're spending far too much money. We've got to find a way to reduce our cost. You understand you have a lot of external resources that's being brought into the business, but you don't really have the data and understand how that data works. You're not really hearing a huge amount of problems of what's going on. But the reason I'm saying this is I'm trying to directly link it to the problems that we're seeing in the industry at the moment, or that people need to be more aware of around, the compliance risk, classification risk. We're all fully aware of the JSL and umbrella and IR35 regs and all those wonderful things. But I had a very, very recent experience of trying to help a business identify what the ROI could be if they shifted their model or took a better approach at compliance. Because I think that to me is fundamentally a challenge that businesses see now when you look at these new legislations. Is that's great. You're just talking about risk, and I'm like, no. Let's physically look at. Okay, your objective is, I'm going to use an example rather than a real life one. Your objective is to reduce cost when it comes to the contingent workforce you're doing. Well, actually, if you didn't realise, there are additional benefits that you can get by looking at that approach. So I agree with you, Jack. It's more about being able to. You've got to have that leadership. You've got to be able to sell to the business, but you've got to have the comfort to be able to do it. And I think that's very difficult for businesses to do right now, which is why. We do our jobs, the jobs that we do, right? We try to help and influence those people to be able to provide an ROI. Have any of you guys sort of had a really positive experience in the last few months of actually being able to do that, that ROI piece where you've done the analysis and you've shared key information that has helped influence a client to make a change, or at least to have that C-level suite discussion?
Yeah, I think, one example that I've had is when we talk about joint and several liability. What we're seeing is end clients don't want any form of risk, which, no client does. And there's ways that you can mitigate that risk by looking at your supply chain and altering it slightly. Now, that doesn't mean that it's a whole new process, but what some of our clients have realized is they're relying on an agency or an MSP that are running a PAYE. So ultimately that leaves the end client joint and severally responsible for any unpaid PAYE. They're not aware of this. They just go to their supplier as an agency and just say, find us the people, do what you got to do. And I think there's that over reliance on people just, we've always done it this way, so we'll continue to do it this way, or we have a contract in place and that contract says we'll all be fine. Do you really want to put your hat on that and assume that all will be fine? Now, changing that process, what we're now seeing is a bit of a shift that some end clients are insisting that there's an umbrella provider in the process, because what you're then doing is you're mitigating the risk by putting it to the agency and the umbrella company, providing that it's a compliant umbrella company. And that's being really well received, because what you're actually doing is you're sort of suggesting you add a step into the supply chain, but you're catering to their concern, which is purely around risk, is how do you mitigate risk? But without those conversations, businesses would just continue down the same path. They would continue the same problems, same processes, creating the same problems, which just means that risk sits with them still when they think that they're factoring it out. And I think that's one thing that's kind of really resonated with me lately, is that a lot of clients aren't aware of these additional resources or ways that you can engage with your external workforce. And by having a simple conversation, you're going to get quite quickly to the point of how do we do this as compliant as possible? Do we do it for an umbrella company? Do we have an agency who's our MSP? Do we engage with technology from a statement of work perspective? Do we have a VMS that sits in the middle that takes the liability? There's so many factors to it, but it's just changing that narrative in their mind and just letting them know, putting the information out there that they're on risk essentially, and they don't want that.
Yeah, well, I'll reflect back to that example I gave. That basically it started off there, direct messaging with our lovely platform LinkedIn. We're just asking those basic questions around, I mentioned earlier about third party. We put of our or IR35 risk goes off to our third party supplier. Now that to me, I was obviously with someone who knows the industry a bit more. I'm like, okay, right, we need to have a discussion, but it's like not 4 barrels, but I literally went back, one of the first ones go back. I went, look, I can really help you understand what you can get from reviewing this. I'm not trying to get your business. I'm really just trying to help you, because when you're telling me that you push all of your IR35 sort of determination responsibility to a third party supplier, it's probably not the right thing to do from a client perspective, right? And so I go back to the education, the education piece. That the reason why they're doing it is because they've always done it, and they're not educating themselves, and then they don't understand the benefits and what other benefits there are to do it. So, but that was a really recent example of it's still happening, and we can help businesses, just come up with ideas that can make change.
There's another one just very quickly, very recently. And they engage with one of the big 4 consultancies, and they've engaged with them for 10, 15 years. And conveniently, every time the legislation has changed with regards to IR35, as has this consultancy's viewpoint. But funnily enough, the consultancy has still remained to work with that business. So all they've done is they've fed the rhetoric of, this is how you should work now because we say. And I think a lot of businesses have just bought into the fact that, they've told us, so we need to continue to work with them in this way. Doesn't necessarily make it right. And we're kind of scratching around underneath, and we've discovered that it's not right. The way that they're engaging them is basically on a day rate model times tools and materials, and apparently they're outside of IR35. But this is coming from one of the big 4 consultancies. So to your point, Alex, yes, I would love to make a sale to this business, of course. However, in the initial, it's just about, are you aware of what this means, what the implications are, what other solutions are there to perform a more streamlined, more efficient, more compliant process for you? And it's just education.
You know what I will do is I'm going to go back to that client because I've missed a question based on this discussion. I'm going to go back and I'm going to say, actually, I had a chat with these guys. You have a watch of the podcast that we just did, but I forgot to ask you all this stuff you're talking about. How is that linking with your overarching business objectives? Like, what's why are you doing things this way? Is there a specific business reason that you bring those works in that way? So bad on me for not probably asking that question. So if there's one tip for myself and others is actually to, when you've got a problem, just stop and think, is it actually aligned to what you're trying to achieve as a business? And maybe you don't know, but maybe you should go and find out.
It's a hard one though, Alex, because there's so many. When you're in those situations, there's so many things you're thinking of, because there is so many levers you could pull on.
The chaps, I got to go in like 1 minute because, as I mentioned, my wife's away at the moment, and I've got to pick the kid up from the bus from school at 12:30.
All good.